Who? For who? Sure. Well, no. Let's let him come back. Yeah, I think there's. Yeah. And it's a Bradford bill, so. One is support, which one? I don't want to break any rules. Does he have to ask? That's it. Yeah, that's the author. I can run down the hallway, but I don't want to have to, if there's confusion. Well, we're waiting. Go ahead. Which one was it? 449.
You might have witnesses and other things happening, so that makes it different.
Senator Grove. Item number 1, SB 14, Grove, serious felonies, human trafficking.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would just give me 1 second to get
Sure.
my witnesses up here. That's right there.
Now I can see everybody's face.
He'll guide you, but yeah, you can set it on your clock, but there's not a timer on the.
Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members. Senate Bill 14 is a bipartisan measure that is joint authored by Senator Caballero and Senator Rubio and co-authored by 12 senators and 20 assembly members. Although not yet in print, Senator Wahab, the chair of Senate Public Safety, and Senator Bradford have also signed on as co-authors. Our bill will include sex trafficking of a minor child in the list of crimes that are defined as serious under the law, making it a strikeable offense. As we all know, human trafficking is exploding in cities across our country. The horrendous practice could very well easily be defined as the crime of our time. And sadly, California is a hub for human trafficking. In 2021, 25,000 children reported missing under the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children who had run away from foster care services was 1 in 6 likely human trafficking victims. Data from the service providers of the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline was consistently shown that groups who experience marginalization by race, income, gender identity, sexual orientation, and immigration status are more likely to be exploited through sex and labor trafficking. I want to thank Senator Bradford for highlighting this fact in his Ebony Alert bill, which outlines how Black women and girls are increased risk of being harmed and trafficked and are disproportionately missing in the state of California. Human trafficking disproportionately affects racial minorities and members of society who come from poor socioeconomic backgrounds. The U.S. State Department notes that human trafficking trends today reflect a living legacy of systematic racism and colonialization globalized during the transatlantic slave trade through chattel slavery and regional practices of indigenous disposition. The U.S. State Department also notes that traffickers factor in racial biases and stereotypes into schemes and strategies aimed at reducing their own risk of getting caught. The Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Human Trafficking in Los Angeles, California, noted that 50% of their domestic trafficking clients are Black, and over 90% of the women in their emergency shelters program are Black. This law will help disseminate or dismantle racial targeting of traffickers who target children of color because they believe that they will face no jail time or limited jail time. A holistic approach is definitely needed to address every facet of this complex issue, including education, identification, funding, and direct support for services for survivors and trauma-informed care. However, we also need stiff penalties and consequences for traffickers themselves who are perpetrating the most brutal and heinous acts upon our vulnerable population, especially those individuals that traffic minor children. Trafficking victims are forced to work 365 days a year without pay. The trafficker tells them when to work, when to eat, when to sleep, when to rest, and takes every dollar they earn. Traffickers even brand their victims in order to show ownership over them as property. Some teenage girls as young as 12 years old are forced to wear a tattoo on their face, branded forever because their life is no longer their own. The violence and torture endured by these victims is so gruesome, it's difficult to understand. Violent acts such as rape, sodomy, beatings, starvation, and strangulation are endured sometimes on a daily basis. The committee's analysis states that the offense addressed by this bill already carries steep sentences. However, with criminal justice reform, the reality is that these perpetrators of this heinous crime rarely serve a full sentence, and oftentimes they return back to the streets to reoffend. One example of trafficking in my district is that of Mr. Richardson. Mr. Richardson trafficked a 15-year-old Orange County girl and was sentenced to 8 years in prison, and he was released after serving less than 4. After he got caught, he moved to my district and again trafficked 3 minor children in Bakersfield and simultaneously sexually exploiting adults. His victims ranged from age to 14 to 20. When my district attorney took him to trial, he was convicted of 3 counts of child sex trafficking, felon possession of a firearm, drug sales, and child pornography. His eligibility to parole is just 11 years from now and growing smaller by the day. Although I know this committee is about addressing prison overcrowding and not enforcing enhancement or adding enhancements to the role, I hope that we can all agree today that repeatedly selling minor children for sex, forcing them to be raped over and over and over again every single day, should be considered a serious felony in the state of California. Instead of using prison overcrowding and the means to protect men who are perpetrating this crime, shouldn't we protect the daughters that are victims of this crime? Passing SB 14 will serve to protect future generations by stopping people from engaging in this crime today. I'm honored to have 3 Strands Global Foundation as the sponsor of SB 14. 3 Strands fights every day to end the horrendous practice of human trafficking and protect survivors from this horrible crime. SB 14 is overwhelmingly supported by 70 statewide and national organizations like Women to Women, formerly incarcerated women, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Californians from across the state have shared their personal stories and voiced their support of SB 14. But here with me to testify and share their testimony directly are 2 experts in the human trafficking field. My first witness is Charmaine Bach, a 33-year veteran prosecutor and former district attorney in the Alameda County area. Charmaine helped create the Human Trafficking Exploitation Heat Unit, the first of its kind in response in the country, a victim-centered, trauma-informed vertical prosecution unit composed of specifically trained prosecutors, investigators, and victim witness advocates who work closely with state and federal law enforcement partners as well as non-governmental organizations to rescue victims and prosecute their exploiters. She is also the co-author of Proposition 35, which includes laws regarding human trafficking that we're discussing here today. Additionally, in order to shine a light on this issue firsthand of trafficked children, is my second witness, an incredible advocate for human trafficking, a survivor, an author, my friend, Miss Odessa Perkins. Miss Perkins was not only trafficked as a child, but she has dedicated her life to help human trafficking survivors and is the CEO of Empowerment Foundation that takes at-risk children and survivors to better their life and teach them that there is something better out there for them and they don't have to go down a path of destruction. I respectfully ask for your aye vote and introduce my first witness.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for having me. You know, after being a DA for so long, you'd think, oh, she gets more conservative the longer you get there. It's actually the opposite is true. I'm a staunch supporter of criminal justice reform. I firmly believe that the answer is not incarceration, but prevention and rehabilitation. But in that context, I also believe that an exception needs to be made in certain instances. And I believe that the human trafficking of a child is one of those exceptions. Why? Because when I co-authored Prop 35 way back when, it was after coming before the Public Safety Committee after 5 tries. And we decided then, somebody approached me from Facebook actually and put it on the statewide ballot, and it passed higher than any initiative in the state of California. And we were focusing on one narrow issue there. But what we didn't anticipate was that the change in the landscape would actually change the numbers that we had. We thought that the triad of 5, 8, and 12 would be just 5, 8, and 12. And that would be a good number, that number would work. But now 5, 8, and 12 is not 5, 8, and 12 anymore. And 12 is really like lightning striking or an earthquake. Nobody gets 12. 12 is a rare bird, right? 12 is like having an eagle land in your backyard. So 5 and 8, you do half on 5, you do half on 8. So that's 4, let's say, or 2.5. But now with the new CDC regs where we're trying to empty out our prisons, you're not even doing 2.5. So you sell a child for sex and you're getting like 2. So what does that mean? Do you remember back in the day when environmental polluters, CEOs were saying, oh, we're going to dump our toxic wastes because it's just a cost of doing business and no one's going to go to jail. It'll just be a fine. We'll pay the fine. Well, that's what traffickers are thinking. And I'm telling you this because I've been in the trenches for 33 years. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. The traffickers with 5 girls in their stable, they're making close to $1 million. Sadly, there's no better bang for your buck. Right, so they're saying, and these girls aren't going to show up. It's one of the hardest cases in the world to prove. It's a combination of domestic violence, sexual assault, drugs, you name it. It's all bundled into one case. So it's super hard to prove to get the 2 years that you get on after all of that. So they're like, yeah, baby, let's roll the dice. So they roll the dice. They think the girl's not showing up. What then happens is you've got your... they do the cost-benefit analysis. They decide to go to trial. Then all they're getting at the end of the day is 2 years. The other thing you need to realize, they're sociopaths. They're actually disconnected from the harm that they're inflicting. In all my years in prosecuting everything from murder to rape, you name it, I've actually done it all.
You need to wrap it up.
Okay, I've done it all. I've never seen anybody like that. And they're emboldened by the fact that that the law has no teeth. And who is suffering? The vast majority of the girls that are being prosecuted are Black and brown girls, are most vulnerable. We need to protect them.
Dear Assembly, I am before you today as a survivor of human trafficking. My story is unique because I have endured many different facets of trafficking. From birth, I faced many challenges. Family members propositioned my mother to abort me. Then I started being touched and groomed. Then I started being made to have sex with grown men. And then I had sex with a lot of quote unquote uncles. And then I was trafficked to the highest bidder, drug dealers. But now what you see before you is a survivor. Let's be clear, everyone does not make it out. They say going through everything that I went through, I should be dead, in jail, a drug addict, or a prostitute. However, I am neither, but so many still are. It's time out for feeling sorry for the monsters that prey on our most vulnerable individuals. I've heard the opposition state Black Californians being disproportionately harmed by 3 strikes, mass incarceration of Blacks, harm to communities, and I've heard many speak in jail about jail overcrowding. But I am here to say I was molested and raped repeatedly by Black and white men, and even some women. So it does not matter the race. What matters is saving our children. Traffickers are getting out of jail early and reoffending, continuing the horrific cycle of abuse and depravity. This law will not affect those that do not reoffend, but it will affect those that hurt our children. I ask you, why sacrifice me, a Black daughter, and those like me, Black, brown, trans, LGBTQ boys and girls that are currently being sold like slaves for money, because you're afraid to put offenders, regardless of race, in jail where they belong. Trafficking has surpassed the illegal arms trade, and it's on its way to passing the drug trade, because you can resell a child over and over again for profit. The Pledge of Allegiance states, "One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." But how are trafficked victims receiving any of this statement if you decide to do nothing? I am here and I look at your faces and wonder, do you care? Because if you do not pass SB 14 and start protecting our most vulnerable, it could land on your doorsteps, and it could hit your niece, your nephew, your daughter, your granddaughters, your grandsons. Eventually, that's where it will be. Can you imagine a child you love having a giant man or woman on top of them, no matter the color, hurting them, going in and out of them, stealing their innocence, and causing all types of trauma they will have to deal with forever if they live? Well, I can, because that was me. I was that child. All of that happened to me. There's a quote that states by Mamie Till Mobley, "What happens to one of us should be the business of all of us." I ask for your vote for SB 14.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in support? Name and organization, please.
Ewan Embley, I support it.
Nick McGill, father of 2, mentor and coach to youth, and I just pray that we will protect children over predators and pedophiles.
Wendy Nielsen, Sacramento, mother of 2, grandmother of 1, protect the children.
Ashley Bryant, CEO, 3 Strands Global Foundation, sponsor of this bill, in strong support.
Noelle CO, policy intern at 3 Strands, co-sponsor of this bill, strongly support.
No, we did not.
Zach Wallace on behalf of the San Diego Deputy District Attorneys Association, San Diegans Against Crime, and individually as a sex crimes and human trafficking prosecutor for 5 years in support of this bill.
Rita Ammerman, mother of 2, grandmother of 8, great-grandmother of 1. I'm in strong support of this bill.
Delcy Steffi, Quaker, mother, Californian, businesswoman. I'm in very strong support of this bill. Thank you.
Ron Lithicum, District Attorney, Sacramento County, and also representing California District Attorneys Association. Strong support. Thank you.
Chair and members, Izzy Swindler on behalf of the list. I do apologize. California Faculty Association, Fresno County, Kern, Tulare, Tulare Supervisor Dennis Townsend, and Larry McCary, Board of Supervisors for Fresno and Kern Tulare. Thank you. In support.
Beth Frericks, California Family Council, strong support.
Nicole Young, mother of 6, strong support.
Allie Snyder, on behalf of Our Duty, in strong support.
Bessie Roche, founder and facilitator of Capital Intercessors and grandmother of 21 grandchildren. I strongly support this bill.
My name is Arlene Espinosa. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist with Zoe International. We're an anti-trafficking organization, and I am in strong support of SB 14.
Brianna Mosley, advocate and survivor of child sex trafficking, also the sister of Blair Mosley, who lost her life after being trafficked last year, and I'm definitely in support.
My name is Sophia Warren. I'm a student, and I strongly support this bill.
My name is Bianca Haynes, and I'm a believer of God, Jesus, and this bill.
My name is Stephanie Webb, and I strongly support this bill.
My name is Oretha Perkins. I am a mother of 3, a grandmother of 4, a great-grandmother of 3 boys, an aunt of a survivor. I am a very strong advocate for your support in Senate Bill 14 passing. Thank you.
Good morning. Katrina Garcia with Kern County Probation Department, and we support this bill.
I'm Tamara Look, and I support.
I am Dr. Angela Look for Kern County Child Protective Services. Strong support of this bill. Please protect our children.
Eleanor Steffi. I am a Quaker, a business owner, a student, and I support this bill strongly. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Chiono. I'm a retired educator of 34 years who, during my course of my teaching, found out that I had had a student that was trafficked. And due to the wonderful work of this survivor, I've been able to learn a lot and help along the way. I strongly support this bill. Thank you.
I am Jenna McKay, and I'm a survivor of human trafficking, and I support this bill.
Hi, good morning, and God bless you all, senators. My name is Sylvia Miller. I'm a parent advocate for Zoe International. I'm a parent who had a child who was trafficked at the age of 14. Today, I work with parents in LA County who have
that's
children
it. Name and
that have been
organization.
trafficked,
Thank
and I
you.
strongly support the SB 14. Thank you, Your Honor.
Hello, I'm a mom, and my name is Mrs. G. I'm here for my 3 children, and here to I had a girlfriend back in middle school that was trafficked, and we were able to help her get out, and I strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Nicole Pearson, attorney, mother of 3, resident, strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Molly Sheehan with the California Catholic Conference, in support. Thank you.
I'm Matthew Munoz, the Executive Director of America's Schools for Choice, and I strongly support this bill.
Hi, good morning. I'm Nellie Tucanco, registered nurse. I strongly support this bill on behalf of my trafficked patients. Please support this bill. Thank you.
My name is Veronica, public health specialist. I strongly support this bill.
Talia D'Amato on behalf of the Tule River Tribe, in support.
Ethan Nagler on behalf of Bakersfield Mayor Karen Go and the full City Council, in support.
Patricia Pistone, retired teacher. I'm here for Concerned Women for America. I strongly support this bill. Thank you.
Cassandra Kelly from Bakersfield. I strongly support this bill.
David Bolog on behalf of the San Fernando Valley Parents and Take a Stand Stanislaus, in support.
Yusef Miller, North County Equity and Justice Coalition, Mosque Against Trafficking, Thrive Lemon Grove, Alabaster Jar Project, Survivor Leader Network of San Diego, and strong support.
Randy Perry on behalf of the California Massage Therapy Council, PORAC, and the California Association of Highway Patrol and Support.
Corey Sozil on behalf of the California State Sheriff's Association support.
Thank you. Are there any witnesses in opposition?
Good morning, committee and chair. My name is April Grayson. I am the senior policy manager. I hear a lot of O's on there. I'm the senior policy manager for the Sister Warrior Freedom Coalition. I sit on numerous anti-trafficking advisory boards for commercially sexually exploited children and adults throughout California. I am also a survivor of human trafficking, and I am here to speak in opposition of SB 14. If SB 14 passes, human trafficking will become a strikable offense with harsher sentences and lifelong consequences. As a survivor, I can see the positive intent of this bill. However, as a survivor who has been criminalized and demonized by the legal system that was meant to protect me, I have to remind the authors in this committee that this bill, I'm so sorry, will actively harm many survivors of human trafficking, especially the Black, Brown, Native, poor, LGBTQ women and trans survivors who are already least likely to see justice. I sit before you as a criminalized survivor of human trafficking. I was born into the CPS system and has touched every system California has to offer. After I was kicked out of the system at 18, I was trafficked. At 19, I was criminalized by the court system, made out to be the perpetrator and the mastermind of a crime that I was also the victim of. I was sentenced to 20 years and 8 months. At that time, the charges were pimping and pandering, but had I been sentenced today, I would have been charged with human trafficking of a minor. I served 17 years in state prison where I received no referral to healing or rehabilitative services. I was considered a violent felon and had to register as a sex offender. I have never been seen as a victim of human trafficking. I was only seen as a bottom, a perpetrator, even though I was 19 and my 27-year-old trafficker was sitting next to me in court. He was never identified as a trafficker, let alone my trafficker, and was never convicted of any trafficking or pimping charges in Sacramento County. I am not a unique case. Not addressed in this committee's bill analysis is the horrifying reality that over 90% of human trafficking victims are criminalized while being trafficked, including many who have human trafficking charges instead of their trafficker. We need to acknowledge that our criminal legal system is not equipped to recognize human trafficking victims, especially young women and trans folk of color who are victims of sexual exploitation. Our current laws fail to provide judges and juries with the information necessary to help identify victims, something that we are trying to fix, well, we tried to fix with AB 1497, which died in Assembly a few months ago. If SB 14 passes, criminalized survivors will be subjected to punishments that will be doubled or escalated to a life sentence under 3 strikes. In many cases, doubled for low-level offenses that are not serious or violent. And prosecuting these survivors will not stop trafficking from happening, since these survivors are so easily replaced by their traffickers. Even with the recent amendments of this bill, there are many survivors who would fall through the cracks and face further punishment and trauma, survivors like me. This bill will have severe collateral negative consequences for victims and survivors. This is not the solution. The solution is to properly investigate cases, provide healing resources, and prevent further harm against survivors by the criminal legal system. Until we can protect victims from arrest, we must not pass laws that will further harm them, their families, or our communities. Under current law, I am still not acknowledged as a victim of human trafficking, even though I was recognized on the Senate floor as a survivor and an expert on human trafficking just a couple of months ago. We must stop creating bills that don't address the nuances of the situation, or we will continue to hurt vulnerable, traumatized victims. I understand that human trafficking is a serious problem, and I recognize what Senator Grove and the co-authors are trying to do with this bill. But until we can successfully identify victims and provide them support and relief, I cannot be in support of SB 14.
Are you testifying?
My name is Margot George, and I'm here today on behalf of both the California Public Defenders Association and the San Francisco Public Defender's Office in opposition to SB 14. Of course, we are opposed to human trafficking of either minors or adults. but we believe that increasing penalties is a failed policy that has neither deterred crime nor prevented future victims. As Senator Grove indicated, and maybe some of the proponents, the human trafficking law provides already for 5, 8, or 12 years in state prison, but it also provides under another subsection for 18, 14, or 20 years, or even under a further subsection, 15 years to life in state prison. SB 14 does nothing to solve the underlying problems in our society which lead to sex trafficking. In fact, in their zealous efforts to prosecute human trafficking, many district attorneys' offices have further victimized the victims, prosecuting them, trying to force them to testify by bringing charges against them. April's story is not unusual. CPDA asks that instead of passing SB 14, you follow the recommendations of the researchers from the University of Southern California Gould School of Law, who were part of the informational hearing that you had here only 2 years ago, whose study found that the United States over-relied on law enforcement and a retributive criminal justice approach to complex societal issues that instead require nuance and understanding of trauma, race, and poverty. They stated effective anti-trafficking efforts are moving away from support for use of operations focusing instead on community involvement, public health, and harm reduction strategies, and investing the money instead of in prisons in poverty relief, anti-discrimination initiatives, and opportunities for education and employment. We respectfully ask for your no vote.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition?
Clara McNeil on behalf of the Ella Baker Center in opposition.
Good morning, Carmen Nicole Cox on behalf of ACLU Cal Action, wanting to align our opposition with the experts. Thank you.
Lizzie Buchan and Shea Justice in opposition.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to committee members for any comments or questions. Mr. Lackey.
Yeah, if I could ask Ms. Sharman, how would Ms. Grayson's concerns play out today?
Shared Hope International is a nationally recognized organization, and I participated with Shared Hope in a 3-year study looking at victim offender intersectionality. And that report is published. You can all read that report. And they came up with recommendations as a result of their report. Right now, the trend, as is the trend in many areas in terms of the criminal justice reform movement, is not to prosecute victim offenders, recognizing the trauma bond and recognizing that victims, what happened, I'm very sorry for what happened to you, but I can tell you that it would be a rare day indeed for that to happen today, absent extreme violence being inflicted by the victim offender. There is a tool that Shared Hope came up with, and it's a tool that you can see on their site. This tool provides for field guidance designed for shareholders in the criminal justice movement working with sex trafficking victim offenders to identify them early on in the process and provide them with the support they need, and to actually exclude them from the charging process so they're not part of the charging process, recognizing their trauma bonds. And we've seen a lot of efforts being made to free women who've, let's say, killed their traffickers. We've seen them released from prison. So I think the response is very different. I can tell you in our heat unit, the response was different. And there was an evolution. In the beginning, There was charging, but by the end of it, it was very, very rare indeed, and that this tool is being implemented with training nationally. It's a very thick report, and 3 years was used to come up with this report by bringing together the best of the minds in the United States from all the NGOs, all of the offices, survivors, you name it, to look at how we could be more effective and victim-centered and trauma-informed in our response. So what happened 20 years ago is not happening today, and we have learned from our mistakes. And as you all know, we are doing our very best to right many wrongs that occurred. And I just think that we need to be careful when we start throwing out numbers. One of the numbers that was thrown out was over 90% that are prosecuted are victims. That's actually not the case. In my unit has prosecuted over 850 cases of human trafficking, and I can tell you that 90% of those that we prosecuted were not victims. Many of those that we prosecuted were repeat offenders, and that is why a law such as SB 14 is so important, because it only will come into play with repeat offenders. And I have personally seen the same faces come in over and over again, and that is what this law is looking at, the repeat offenders, and only the repeat offenders.
Thank you, and excuse me. Senator Grove, we thank you for this particular measure and for your leadership on this incredibly important and very, very troubling issue. This bill puts into statute something that should already be self-evident, that human trafficking is a minor of a minor. Human trafficking of a minor is a very serious felony. You know, there's a movie that's out right now that is enjoying some success, and it tells of the horrific stories of child trafficking and highlights the tremendous courage of victim survivors of this very, very nasty criminal behavior. And I would ask members to please listen to your conscience. Human trafficking, especially using children, is an affront against any measure of decency and of values at all. I hope that we'll do our part by protecting the innocent and support this critical measure. Thank you.
Any other?
Sure. Mr. Vice Chair, you first.
It's more of a comment than anything. I just want to thank all of those who came up and support the survivors out there. I know it takes a lot of courage to do what you have done. As a prior crimes against children's detective, I got to see my share of it as well, and it takes a lot to be here and tell your stories and be part of this. And to the Senator, thank you for your leadership in that and bringing this up. And I'll be proud to be voting for this today. Thank you. That's a motion.
Second.
Any other comment? Mr.
Yes,
Bryan?
There's a lot of courage at this table right now, and a lot of power and a lot of strength, and I want to thank you all for coming and for everybody coming. Having been somebody touched by the child welfare system myself and having had hundreds of foster siblings, I know the intersections of many of these systems and how they build on each other. I'm struggling with some different things. One of them is recognizing the complexity that Ms. Grayson has brought up, that complexity and nuance that breaks us out of these binary right and wrongs because it's complicated. And I see that we can't even fully break out of that because we're using language like victim offenders. I have no idea what a victim offender is. I know people, I know young girls, I know young people who have experienced trauma and pain and had that exploited against them for profit in some instances. I know that what was said is we have learned from the past, and I would say we haven't fully, we are learning. We've been in the process of learning. We used to charge kids under 18 with prostitution knowing that they can't consent. In fact, there are people in this room who fought against safe harbor bills that protected young people under 18 from being charged with solicitation or prostitution, knowing that they couldn't give consent. There are people in this legislature who fought those kinds of efforts while still trying to shame some of us for being cautious about using the criminal legal system as a means of deterrence when all evidence has shown that longer sentences don't actually stop things from happening. All they do is increase our investment in systems of harm and subjugation at the expense of the investments that the communities needed to not have this be a problem to begin with. The same communities that have the highest rates of human trafficking are the same communities that have the highest unemployment rates, the highest rent burdens, the lowest amount of small businesses owned, the highest economic burdens in our state. But instead of investing the resources to take away the economic incentives in these kinds of illicit markets, we invest all of those resources in our $15 billion plus prison infrastructure. And I struggle with that because the problem is still here, and we've been doing that strategy for 2.5 decades now. I want to thank the author. You've been working on this for a long time. And we talked, and I've been trying, and I've called everybody I know to call, including people in this room, and I've gone back and forth with the righteous intentions that you've brought here and the struggles I have with some of the foundational principles that this kind of legislation is building on. And so I can't get there today, but I want to thank you for your leadership and your courage. I want to thank you for the witnesses who have spoke on both sides. I know that that is incredibly difficult, and this is not necessarily a safe place. But know that your impact is going to have a lasting memory for me and everybody on this dais, regardless of how this vote shapes today. And I just want to thank you again.
Ms. Ortega.
Again, I want to thank today's witnesses and the senator. As the only woman left, we have my colleague Mia, who's I'm sure feels, and I don't want to speak for her, but as a woman of color, as a mother, your testimony today was just incredible, and I want to thank you for sharing your stories and also apologize for a system that has clearly failed many of you. However, similar to my colleague, the system isn't alone, and 3 strikes has also shown that it has failed many in our community. And so, I'm struggling with how do we support you with mental health access, with housing, with education, with good jobs, because it's part of a holistic approach. Sending someone to prison for the rest of their lives is not going to fix the harm moving forward. And that's the part that, I'm struggling with. It's a complex issue. My commitment to the witnesses, everyone that's here today, is to continue to address this issue. It is horrendous. It should not be happening. And I am committed to working with the senator and others to figure out a way to move this forward in a way that we can all support. Thank you.
I usually don't ask questions, sure, but I do have one because this is so serious. This is so important. In the report, it says the offenses addressed by this bill already carries very steep sentences. These punishments can often be further enhanced by any number of existing sentence enhancements. Human trafficking of a minor for purposes of commercial sex is punishable by up to 12 years in prison. If the offense involves force, fear, fraud, deceit, coercion, violence, duress, menace, or threat of unlawful injury to the victim or another person, the penalty is 15 years to life. The court may also impose up to $1.5 million in fine on a person convicted of human trafficking. If great bodily harm is inflicted on the victim to commit the human trafficking crime, an enhancement of up to 10 more years in state prison can be added. A person convicted of human trafficking for sexual conduct is also required to register as a sex offender. Any property or money used to facilitate human trafficking is subject to seizure. I think you may have, and maybe this is what I'm hearing and my question is our criminal justice system not using these laws now to enforce a great harm on a whole lot of women? What this may be our lane that we can all agree on. What is that gap? Because I get the feeling that you're saying, or what I heard from one of the witnesses, that judges or DAs or maybe even law enforcement is not actively using these laws to do what you want, is to get these people off the street and get them the appropriate punishment, which I see is already here. And what bothers me is, what makes you think if they're not doing it now, adding enhancements will make them do it again, will make them happen? They still may not do it. So at the end of the day, what we want is to protect these women. And we want law enforcement to protect these women. We want the courts to protect them. And our children, most important, we want them to be protected. So what is going on out there in the world that these minors, women, because I've heard this also with others, are not being protected with existing laws? Is it because if they're not moving even on these, what makes you think they'll move on the others? That's kind of the kind of perplexing. I don't know if it's you or if it's people who are working in the field. Is it because we also are doing this also in terms of minor crimes like shoplifting. That isn't being prosecuted. That isn't being enforced. So something's going on out there where we're not, and I say we because I'm part of the state, I'm part of the government. So what are we not doing to make sure that we adequately can protect people with public safety?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I'll respond and then I'll turn it over to someone who has 33 years in the former district attorney's office in the Alameda County for the Heat Unit, who has prosecuted many of these cases. Since that law and those laws and code sections were established, we've done a complete turnaround, which is just of the criminal justice reform, allowing good credits and time off for good behavior and work credits and all the credits. So when you apply credits to someone who has sold a child and been convicted of human trafficking, just like the example I gave you with the Orange County individual who trafficked a minor child, got sentenced to 12 years and did less than 4 because of all the application of the criminal justice reform. And then he reoffended. Now, the 3 strikes law, and I understand that that's a huge issue in this committee and that you don't want to apply 3 strikes. It only takes effect for a second or third time offender. So if you are arrested and convicted of selling a child, this bill will not apply a strike, and I can be corrected by the district attorney if need be, but it will not apply a strike to their life until they reoffend for another violation of selling a minor child. And then the extension, the enhancements apply. So with the good time credits and all the criminal justice reform that has taken place over the years since that's been established, they have a discounted time in prison, which reduces their time. So imagine my witness or the opposition witness, Miss Grayson. I mean, can you imagine their trafficker being sentenced to prison and getting out in 4 years and walking up on the street and seeing them again? For both of these women who were trafficked, brutalized, made to do things that they never ever in their natural life would ever do without coercion or abuse or threat of their life. These are survival mechanisms that both of these women took on both sides of this bill. Survival mechanisms. None of us can even imagine what that's like to go through. I've learned so much from Miss Grayson sitting down with her. Miss Grayson was the reason that we amended the bill to take violent out of it, because under violent, with a violent felony, they couldn't, an individual like Miss Grayson couldn't apply for vacatur or have an affirmative defense. And so we took that out. And I can tell you that if either one of these women were walking down the street and in 4 years saw their trafficker, the person who perpetrated the most heinous crimes against them, the trauma that they would go through would just be all over reliving the horrific events that took place in their younger years, 20 plus years ago.
Okay, so that didn't really answer my question.
I thought I did,
because we
sir.
offered no plea bargain to you so that we capture more and bring, and I get the, my understanding that was not accepted. So as far as law enforcement and when they coming through the system, are they, what's going on?
I got it. Let me try to answer your question. So here's the deal. Unlike some crimes where you're bloodied and battered, right? And you're like, okay, she got raped. She's got blood all over her. You know, she's ripped open, whatever. With human trafficking of a minor, you don't need to be bloodied and battered.
That's true.
The coercion is psychological.
True.
So the 15 to life section that you referred to, that's when, you know, the gun is in your mouth, or we had a case where the aerosol can was in your vagina and the curling iron was on your arm and the tattoo was on your forehead, where it's screaming violence and torture, and you were literally ripped out of your parents' home and kept for 2 years, and this was done to you, okay? So that's the 15 to life scenario. By and large, and we're seeing an uptick of it right now because the traffickers are getting so brazen because the law has no teeth. The kidnapping of young black and brown women has been on the rise. There was an article, I don't know what paper it was because I get my news on my telephone these days, but it's on the rise. So what law we're dealing with isn't the 236.1C2, it's 236.1C1, which is 5, 8, or 12. That's the trafficking of a minor. And what we're trying to tell this esteemed committee is that under the current landscape, those are at not just half-time anymore, but less than half-time because of the CDC, the California Department of Correction regs, which reduces it by roughly a third. So it's less than that. Now, to your point, I don't know if I answered your question, but
you're answering the problem of CDCR,
So we're
letting
using-
people out too early,
we're
which
using-
is a concern, which is a very valid concern.
Right, so we're using.
But if someone serves 12 years, if the court,
Sorry.
if they serve 12 years like they're supposed to, and if they're not rehabilitated, but we're letting them out, that is a real problem, especially if it's way less than 12 years. So I'm saying that I hear you.
The laws also changed in order to do the 12 years. That's an aggravated term on the triad of 5, 8, or 12, and you have to justify the aggravated term. And so I said it's like having an eagle land in your backyard. Like, I'm psyched if I see a red-tailed hawk, right? That's a good day. But I haven't had an American eagle land in my backyard.
Okay.
So getting 12 years on a human trafficking case where the young girl is 14 and trauma bonded, it just doesn't usually happen. Okay. So you're looking at 5 or 8. So let's just divide that by 2, and I'm mathematically impaired, but I can do that. So that's 2.5 or 4. And then you've got the CDC regs, so it's less. Now recognize that organized crime is in it. Gangs are in it, because as you heard from our witness, they can do it over and over again. So recognize also that this is a huge moneymaker. These girls are ATM machines. So we're charging the C1s, and they're rolling the dice. We're charging them. We're doing our job. We're charging those cases. All, not just Alameda County, but all the DAs across are charging them. But it's very hard to have it stick, and the traffickers know that because they're trauma bonded. It's a Stockholm syndrome.
So thank you.
And cases.
Thank you, Senator Grove.
Cases like our
You've
witness.
alerted me to something that that we really need to look at, how quickly offenders are getting out. And so maybe you and I can work on that together.
And this will change it because it would be at a different percentage rate.
This is 3 strikes. 3 strikes is a whole nother discussion. So we're talking about people getting out that should never get out early because of what they did. And I think that's a very, very, very valid point. If they're not rehabilitated, they should not get out. I believe that's one of your tenets in what you're moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would love to have your aye vote to continue the conversation because I know you have the power to pull the bill back to this committee if I don't do what I commit to do.
I don't know if I have that kind of power, but okay. You may close.
Thank you. Colleagues, the dictionary defines slavery as a condition in which a human being is owned by another. A slave was considered by law property, chattel, and derived of most rights ordinarily held by a free person. Human trafficking is modern slavery. My witness, Odessa Perkins, is sitting here today representing the millions of victims of modern-day slavery. Trafficked victims are owned by other people. They're derived of most rights that all of us hold dear. They're considered property. You can see even by some of the tattoos, and abusers demonstrate ownership. They have sex trafficking tattoos. We have a board, which I apologize I did not bring up here. I don't know if it's even readily available, but we have several pictures of young women with tattoos, branding barcodes on their face that are as young as 12 years old. And that's so the trafficker, the owner of that property, can keep track of them. I urge you to listen to the experts in the field and listen to the men and women and children that have been trafficked, to law enforcement officers, the 70 coalition team, nonprofits and organizations that came here today to support this bill. I don't think any one of you on this dais thinks that human trafficking of a minor should not be a serious crime and have a serious offense applied to it. Again, the only time it's applied is in the second or third offense. So it's not like we're taking somebody who made a mistake, who didn't understand the law, and locking them up for a longer period of time. They have to reoffend in the same sector of human trafficking of a minor. When this bill started out, it covered labor trafficking because in San Bernardino County, they arrested the sheriff out there in the marijuana grows, illegal marijuana grows. They rescued over 100 Hmong individuals that had been forced into labor camps right here in the state of California. And it also included everybody, 0 to whatever age. If you were an individual being forced into labor in a Beverly Hills mansion and you were deprived of your rights as a human being, or it included individuals like Jenna McKay, who has not been able to have her testimony be heard today, but has spoken in other committee hearings, where she wasn't beaten or threatened or kidnapped. She thought what she thought was fell in love. She fell in love. She was in a 4-star college down in Southern California, wooed away from that environment, and took to Vegas and gang raped and then sold by what she thought was her boyfriend. So I can tell you that I urge you to listen to the experts. God's children are not for sale. We amended the bill in public safety on the Senate side to only include minors 0 to 17, thinking that once we got to the Assembly, 0 to 17 to not have a serious felony would be so easy to get out of this committee. And I'm sad to hear that I was wrong. I can tell you that when this bill passed the Senate, it had co-authors, both Democrat and Republican. It has 20 Assembly member co-authors, Democrat and Republican. It has 2 Democrat joint authors, and it received no votes. And I did not get one abstention. Every California state senator, both in public safety and on the Senate floor, voted aye for this bill because it addresses an issue that is very serious in the state of California. So I just ask for you to consider that. And I want to make a comment on Miss Grayson. It's been my privilege and my honor to get to know her. She is right. Listening to her story, she has never been recognized as a victim. And what a horrible injustice to lock her up in prison for 17 years. She endured some of the same horrific events that my witnesses and those survivors that are here in this room came to testify. When I approached Miss Grayson this morning, she told me that this is one of the hardest things she's ever had to do, was to stand up and say and oppose a human trafficking bill. What's sad about this whole situation is that no one has ever offered her healing or recognized her as a victim. I recognize her as a victim of human trafficking, a victim of the criminal justice system, but her story is very far and few between because of the criminal justice system reforms that we have today in our system. Miss Grayson, someone like Miss Grayson under the HEAT unit, they have not prosecuted anyone like Miss Grayson in almost 15 years. That injustice that happened to Miss Grayson and that is still happening to her, I feel like today, is 20 years ago, 17 years in prison, and then also as a human trafficking survivor. She did those things. There's no doubt in my mind she did those things because she was forced to, or it was a survival mechanism. And then to sit next to your human trafficker in a courtroom while they punished you is a complete injustice. The laws have changed, and we're making sure that that never happens to another individual. And so I just respectfully ask for the continuation of this bill to go forward. Let's work on this to make it better. It still has to go through appropriations, and on the assembly floor, we have time to amend this bill. We have time to make sure that there are precautionary things in place, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
And I just want to make sure we acknowledge both of your witnesses.
Thank you.
It is extremely difficult to come and lay bare everything that has happened to you. We are, the committee as a whole, very sorry for what you went through. It was not right, never will be right. And you are commended for being here. And then we have witnesses on the other side that also have gone through kind of the same. And that's what makes things hard. Both of you have very powerful, tearful testimony that makes it really difficult for the committee as a whole to make decisions. One of the things I can offer, whether it moves forward or even if it doesn't make it out of here, if it doesn't make it out of here, you ask for reconsideration. If it goes to the other side, I don't want to pull it back. I want to be able to make sure it's right before it leaves here.
I would work
I
with you, sir.
I think there's a lane that we can get to. You and I have not discussed this one-on-one. That's one thing. The author and I have not discussed it and come up with opportunities to move this forward in a way that works for not only the majority of members of the committee, but will be able to make sure that the three strikes law doesn't become a problem in the community that I represent and a lot of members on this committee represent.
I appreciate your comments, sir. I did
So,
reach out to your
but I
office
also want to make sure
several
you
times.
understand. I get where you're coming from, and I don't think you realize you may have also opened up a can of worms when it comes to people getting out sooner than they should. That maybe you and I can also work on, or maybe this bill is the one that we can work on. And if it doesn't, reconsideration, it could start. I know people don't understand. It could still start at the beginning of the year if it doesn't make it out of here. But we're going to have to work really, really, really. I'm going to add two more reallys on this. Hard to get it to where we can move forward.
I appreciate
Okay.
the chair's comments.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
May I say something?
And I'm sorry, we're done. Thank you. But again, thank you for commenting. Yes, call a roll.
On SB 14 by Senator Grove, the motion is due pass to the Appropriations Committee. Jones Sawyer.
So I was a no, I'm now not voting. So we're moving in the right direction.
Jones Sawyer, not voting. Alanis. Bonta. Bryan. Bryan, not voting. Lackey.
Proudly aye.
Lackey, aye. Ortega. Ortega, not voting. Santiago. Zabur. Zabur, not voting.
So you're asking for reconsideration?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You have to say it. You have to.
Oh, petition for reconsideration, sir.
And, that bill fails. Reconsideration is granted unanimously.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your work, folks.
right there. That's the picture you need to take.
Move the bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members.